The same thing is happening in our feet because the ground hasn't changed, right? Our feet have changed. And we have thousands of sensory nerve endings on the bottoms of our feet. So the more that we're in really cushy shoes and soft socks, our feet are in there going, I'm trying to feel something. I'm going to turn up the volume because all I feel is vanilla.
Welcome back to another episode of the Peak Performance Life podcast. Today, I am very excited to be talking about such an important topic that we have not covered yet on this podcast, and that is foot health, good functioning feet as you get older and you want to be able to walk around, you want to be able to do things, you want to be active. And foot problems are really an issue that can be avoided if you think about it ahead of time. And it's something we're going to talk about today. We have an expert. Her name is Dr. Jen Perez. She's the co-owner and vice president of Gait Happens. As both an educator and a clinician, her mission is to empower as many people as possible to take charge of their lower body health so they can get back to doing what they love. Dr. Perez holds a Bachelor's of Science in Kinesiology-Sports Medicine and a Doctor of Chiropractic Degree. She has lectured internationally on foot and gait biomechanics and helped clients across the globe live healthier lives from the ground up. Dr. Perez, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thank you so much, Tulor. I'm excited. I think, like you said, I think it is a very exciting topic, and it's also a topic that doesn't get discussed as much as it should because of the impact that it has on our lives.
Yes, that's right. And I think it is starting to become a little more into mainstream consciousness because literally just last week, I'm in, some group texts and everyone's always asking me questions. And so they're like, hey, what about the sneakers? What about, I heard that these sneakers are bad, but I tried the barefoot one and now my feet hurt because I can't wear them all day. And so I'm sure we'll get into all this kind of stuff.
Definitely.
But let's start, I guess, with, what did you see that got you interested and kind of on the path of doing the work that you're doing today?
That's such a good question because I, like so many people, hated feet. Like I truly hated feet growing up. I was like, they're gross. Like I don't want to deal with feet. Even when I went into chiropractic school, I went in with the intention of working with shoulders and overhead athletes. That's my background. I was a softball player through college, and that was kind of my goal. And the kind of funny story was I went to a taping seminar to learn how to use kinesiology tape. And the instructor kept using feet as the example. And I was like, nobody came here to learn how to tape feet. Like we all want to learn shoulders, right? And I was just so annoyed when it started. But when she started talking about the biomechanics of the foot and really the implications that the function of the foot had on gait and gait mechanics and the entire chain, which walking is one of the most common movements we do, right? Like hopefully we're doing it thousands of times per day. It really was a curtain that was, taken back. I really had my eyes open to the impact that the function of our feet have on our entire kinetic chain. And it was something that I had never heard before. And this was, about 8 years ago. And that instructor was Dr. Courtney Conley, who is now my business partner. And we have been trying to share the power of foot mechanics and foot health with the world ever since.
Amazing. I absolutely love it. I think a lot of people don't realize how much it's connected to other things, like people who have, potentially hip issues or can't, like for me, trying to do a deep squat or something. And like now I actually work with a trainer once a week, not to lift weights, but for mobility. And one of the things she does constantly is like ankle mobility, foot mobility. It's like, hey, your ankle mobility and foot mobility is not where it should be. And I think a lot of people never even thought about that. So it's such an important topic. Let's talk. First of all, define gait. What does gait actually mean?
Gait is just a fancy word for how you walk. So gait mechanics are the mechanics of how you walk. That's really all it is.
Got it. Okay, great. And so what are some of the common mistakes that you see, or people come to you with problems, or I guess what are some of the problems that people may not even realize have to do with foot and ankle mobility?
Yeah, that's such a great question. So People come to me with all kinds of discomfort symptoms. So typically, just because I am known as the foot person, people are coming in with lower body complaints, but there can be things that affect the whole chain, all the way up to the neck, the back, the hips, the SI joints, which is where your spine meets your pelvis. Really, our entire body is involved in moving and walking. Typically, though, the things people are coming to me with are things like bunions, where they're having a protrusion at the side of their big toe that's painful, or big toe arthritis, where they're starting to get a bump on the top of the big toe, plantar fasciitis, Achilles tendinopathies, kind of following up that chain into knee injuries, starting to get knee arthritis and things like that. Because as you said, the mechanics of how the foot and the ankle function absolutely affects the rest of the chain. So for example, going into one of the common aberrant patterns that we'll see with gait. For those that are listening, I'm going to describe this, but for those that are watching, I have my handy dandy foot model present. So when we're looking at, for example, what we call ankle rocker. So when your foot comes down and hits the ground, and then you start to take your step and your foot is directly underneath you. This is called mid stance of gait. So I'm on one foot and my foot is directly underneath me. Once we continue to move forward, our ankle has to bend. This is called ankle rocker. We need about 10 degrees of ankle mobility for the gait cycle. If I don't have good ankle mobility, if I can't move at my ankle, I'm not going to just stand in one place and not move forward. I'm going to find another way around it. So oftentimes what we'll see people do is they'll turn their foot out. So now I don't have to go over my ankle. I can cheat and go through my subtalar joint into excessive pronation. Or what we'll see is what's called an early heel rise. So instead of bending at the ankle, they start to lift the heel early so that the ankle doesn't have to bend at all. These people will oftentimes have a big bump on the back of their heel that can be painful. That's called a Haglund's deformity. And it's from rubbing on the inside of their shoe when they pull their heel up too early. So there's lots of different ways that we can find another way to move forward. And that's why it's so interesting when you look at the mechanics, because we could both have limited ankle mobility, but you could be coming in with plantar fasciopathy because you turn your foot out to avoid your ankle, which is putting excessive pressure on your plantar fascia. And I instead have Achilles tendinopathy because I'm pulling my heel up early. So we could have two completely different symptoms that we think are totally unrelated, but it's because of the way we're avoiding our ankle. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. It makes absolutely a lot of sense. And so what are the biggest causes for people? Now, I guess I'll throw one out there that I heard is, unfortunately, I thought Nike Air Max sneakers were the cool sneakers for too many years, and they have this humongous cushion underneath the heel. And for years, I didn't realize that was actually messing up my foot and ankle mobility. And so I've changed, and I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about that. But is that one common thing that you see?
Yeah. So talking specifically about the ankle still?
I guess foot and ankle, like what are the biggest problems that you see have caused this, right? Obviously there are people who just don't move enough, right? But in terms of like people like myself, so like I am active, I do move, but yet, certain things, right? So for me, actually at the moment, if you want to use me as a little case study in the moment, but for some reason when I play pickleball the next day, my right Achilles is sore, only on my right foot, not my left foot. Same thing when I'm doing like calf raises recently. It's like, I try not to do too many because I don't want my right Achilles to be sore the next day. It doesn't bother me when I'm doing things, but then I'm like, why is my one foot side sore and the other side not? And then maybe people that have, we'll talk about other things like bunions. I think is very common as well. But yeah, anything so far on what I said?
Yeah. So I think there's kind of two conversations there. So one being kind of pain on one side, and that's honestly very, very common. It's something that we see because as humans, we're asymmetrical beings, right? We're one hand dominant. We don't do everything with both hands. We have one foot dominance. We don't do everything. We don't shift our weight equally from side to side. So when we add all of that together into our movement patterns, it's normal for us to see some asymmetries. what we try to do is we try to minimize kind of major asymmetries that we see. And really, one of the goals that we have, we're not trying to turn everyone into a robot. We don't want everyone to be absolutely perfect when they're walking. All we're trying to do is maximize efficiency within their movement pattern. So if there's something that's standing out to us significantly, so for example, if I was to watch you walk or play pickleball, and it seems like when you're moving to one side, you have much more stability in your ankle, in your hip, and then on the other side, it looks a little wobbly, right? Or it looks like we're sinking into that hip a little bit more. I might want to look at, okay, is there an asymmetry there that we can work on? Because maybe that's contributing to the symptoms on one side. So as far as the one-sided mechanics, I think looking to kind of biomechanical asymmetries can be one piece of the puzzle. Also, as simple as strength, right? Like if we're dominant on one side, it can lead to overuse on that side. Or if we're dominant, like you said, it was your right side, right?
Yeah, and now that I think about it, when you're playing pickleball, it's pretty much all right hand, right? Everything
Right?
is right hand.
Exactly. It's an asymmetrical sport, right?
Right.
Same with tennis, and honestly, same with most sports. So,
Right.
I think it's just looking at strength, mobility, kind of comparing side to side, and then looking at the demand of the activity that you're trying to do, and just making sure that you're well prepared for that activity. Going back to the conversation about footwear, because I do think that footwear has played a major role in our function, specifically talking about cushion. So cushion is really interesting because I heard a phrase recently that was comfort is king. It's a phrase that's used a lot in like the footwear sales realm. And they said, at the end of the day, comfort is king. And I'm like, well, comfort may be king, but education is queen. And it's really comes down to the golden rule of the musculoskeletal system is use it or lose it. It really is. It's that simple, right? So when we take that into footwear, the cushier our shoe is, the more rocker it has to make it easier to push off, right? This is all backed by research. If you have toe spring or rocker, which is where the front of the shoe lifts up, it makes it easier. It decreases the work required to push off. So by making things easier for our feet, we don't have to use them as much. And over time, this can lead to atrophy of the muscles. We actually have 4 layers of muscles inside our feet, and they're really, really complex and they're really, really strong. But when we don't use them, even if we're super active, I have ultra runners who are incredibly athletic, and then I go to test their foot strength and they're showing up with 10% of the foot strength that they should have in order to manage the amount of distance that they're covering. So it really comes down to use it or lose it. And the more shoe that you have, the less your foot has to work.
So then should we be walking around barefoot as much as possible?
So the short answer is yes, but I'm going to put a big old asterisk on there, right? And I think, this conversation, as you said, it is becoming more of a mainstream conversation. And it's also really confusing because there's kind of the two camps out there. There's the camp that's like, you should be in shoes 100% of the time and you need arch support. And then there's the camp that's like, go barefoot 100% of the time. And I think we need to meet in the middle a little bit. I think we need to understand the right shoe for the task, right? Because in general, yes, going barefoot is going to require the most out of your feet. It's going to require mobility. You have to adapt to the surfaces that you're on. You have to propel yourself forward. It requires strength. It allows your toes to spread. So going barefoot is really, really healthy. But I'm not necessarily going to run barefoot if I'm doing an ultra marathon, right? Like I need to wear the shoes that are appropriate for the task at hand. The other side of that is also understanding where you're coming from. Because if you are coming from a max cushion, really aggressive shoe, you've been in orthotics for 10, 20, 30 years, you probably do have some atrophy in your feet. Your feet aren't used to feeling the ground. So don't just go from 100 to 0, right? We need to step down. We need to build strength. You wouldn't be absent from the gym for 20 years and then show up on day 1 expecting to deadlift 300 pounds, right? We need to actually progressively build strength in our feet, just like we would every other part of our body.
Yes, yes, I absolutely love that and agree 100% and can speak from experience because as soon as I heard, oh, these big Nike air bubble cushions on my under my heel are not good, I immediately said, I'm buying the barefoot, sneakers. I
Yep.
think it was like the Vive barefoot or one of those. I can't
Yeah,
even remember
super
the brand
barefoot.
honestly, but it was
Yeah.
it was it was a real barefoot. Like you walk on the cement and you feel the little cracks on the cement under your feet and everything. And I could tell you, it just didn't work. It just didn't work for me going from 100 to 0. It was just too hard. I mean, maybe I could do it for 20, 30 minutes at a time and per day and be okay. But in terms of, yeah, so I actually found, and I'm curious to hear your recommendations. I actually found a sneaker that I feel is kind of an in-between sneaker. So
Yeah.
kind of in between full barefoot, but has a zero drop and a wide toe thing, right? Which are two important things. Maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's actually a great point because when we are talking about transitioning to less shoe, we do recommend exactly that transitioning. And that can look like two different things. And honestly, it comes down to where you are in your journey, right? If you're already going barefoot at home, when you're in the house, or if you have a little bit more exposure, you're not experiencing any major symptoms, sometimes you can just kind of jump to that barefoot shoe, like a Vivo Barefoot, a Zero. There's so many amazing brands out there now. But I do recommend doing the time increase. So exactly what you ended up doing of like 10, 15 minutes, like let's just kind of do graded exposure here, 10, 15 minutes in the new shoe, switch to your old shoe, and then kind of build up from there. That's one transition strategy. Another transition strategy is to find a transition shoe, which is exactly what you just talked about. So finding something in between. My kind of go-to rule for footwear is find the least amount of shoe possible, but as much as necessary.
Yeah.
It's right. So it's, whatever you think you need, try to step down just a little bit. But if it's too far, step back up. And that's okay. It's all about kind of dancing along that spectrum of solutions. And there's a reason they all exist. So as far as having a transition shoe, there are some out there that I do like. For example, so this is a brand, again, for those watching, but a brand like Ultra. So Ultra Running, they kind of have a whole spectrum as well because they do have more maximalist cushion shoes, but then they have shoes that have a lower stack height or a lower amount of cushion. So going on the lower end could be a more transitional shoe. And then you also have brands that are more on the minimalist side, but they have some shoes that have more cushion. So it's kind of like you have like the regular brands that have thinner options, and then you have the minimalist brands that have thicker options that help you get to that center point. Lems, for example, is a brand that I highly recommend for transitional shoes. They have currently a model called the Primal Zen, which kind of falls, I believe, around 18 millimeters, 18 to 20 maybe. And so it really acts as, again, like that nice transition shoe.
Nice, nice. Another one you showed was just Ultra, Altra, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yep. And then the one I've tried, I don't know if you heard of them, but the one I've been wearing is Flux,
Okay.
Flux.
Yeah. Yeah. Flux is another brand. They came to the market a few years ago, and they also offer wide toe box options as well. And this may have changed because I haven't looked at their shoes in a while. Some of their more original shape, I wasn't a big fan of the toe box on them, but I know they came out with newer models that had a wider toe box, so I would just be a little cautious around that. But again, that could have been updated. I haven't looked recently.
Got it. Yeah, for me, it's been a great in between shoe, and again, and so are the things we're looking for kind of the zero drop? I guess it's called zero drop, meaning the heel is not elevated with a ton of cushion, and then wide toe box, right? So a lot of sneakers are kind of just crunching your toes in together in the front, and you want a big wide open spot. Is that the two biggest things we're looking for in the sneakers then?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's kind of 4 criteria that go into a more minimalist shoe. So the acronym is WTFF. So essentially, wide toe box is first. And this is regardless of where you end up on that spectrum, having a wide toe box is pretty much non-negotiable. And the reason for that is when you have a toe box, which is the front of the shoe, so think about from the ball of your foot up to the toes. If you look at your shoe and when you put your hands on the side of that shoe, it looks like a triangle, then that is what it is doing to your toes. Your toes are supposed to lay straight in line with the bones behind them called your metatarsal bones. So technically the toes should be actually the widest part of our foot. And it's also really important for the function of our foot. Going back to gait mechanics, when our foot hits the ground, the toes in the forefoot have to be able to spread, because that spreading creates tension across the forefoot, which is what gives us stability to push off. This is also really important in that conversation about bunions. But going back to the shoes, having a wide toe box, something that allows your toes to lay straight without being put together, non-negotiable across the board. So whether you're going high cushion or low cushion, has to be wide toe box. And then you're looking at of the WTFF, we're looking at wide toe box, thin, flat, and flexible. And it kind of goes in that order. So essentially, thin is, again, that stack height conversation of the least amount of cushion as possible, but as much as needed. Flat is the zero drop. And this is important because our feet were designed to distribute load evenly between the rear foot, where our heel is, and our forefoot. So it makes sense that our shoe should lay in that same plane. But when we start to elevate the heel, there's two things that happen. We shift our weight forward and we increase the load on the forefoot. So if you do have forefoot pain, like bunions, metatarsalgia, Morton's neuromas, any hammer toes, right? Anything that happens in the forefoot, you're increasing the pressure on the forefoot. You're also, over time, going to shorten the soft tissues of the posterior compartment, which is tissues like your Achilles tendon. So in order to, right, golden rule, let's go back to it, use it or lose it. If I'm not using my full ankle range of motion because I'm sitting in a high heel can be as little as 8 millimeters, right? But over time, those tissues start to shorten. And then the last one was flexible. The foot is supposed to be flexible. There's 33 joints in the foot. It is designed to move and adapt to different surfaces. So again, once our feet can tolerate it, we want to allow them to move.
Yeah. I'm just thinking about how awful high heel shoes are. When I see my wife wearing, I'm like, it's the opposite of everything you mentioned. High heel in the back, toes squished together in the front.
Even flats, right? Like I've got a flat in my hand it's just a triangle, and right. I can't even imagine putting my foot back. This was something I wore in student clinic, and I keep it to just use it as a terrible example.
Yes, exactly. Well, let's transition a little bit, because I know you're an expert and even have a little kit as well that helps people, like you said, exercise and stretch and move their feet around. And this is something where, again, I've been lifting weights for, 30 years or something, right? Since I was 13 years old. Don't think anyone ever taught me about, doing toe exercises or foot exercise. Like just never happened. Never got explained to me. So talk about the importance and how people can stretch or exercise their feet to regain some of that foot strength.
Yeah, it's such an important conversation, because I think even when you do look up foot exercises, the number one thing that's out there is like scrunching a towel or picking up marbles or something like that. And I'm actually really not a fan of those exercises either. And the reason for that is specifically the muscles that you're using with them. Because oftentimes one of the biggest compensations that we see in everyone is gripping the ground with our toes. And we can grip the ground for a number of reasons. We could grip the ground because we have a history of ankle sprains and we're trying to find stability, or because our feet aren't as strong as they need to be, or because maybe our core isn't as strong as we need it to be. So we're holding ourselves to the ground. But the more you grip the ground with your toes, the stronger the long muscles of the toes get. So it's called flexor digitorum longus. And so this muscle gets really, really strong. Well, picking up marbles and scrunching a towel is that same exact motion. So in essence, by saying what not to do, I also want to say what to do. And what we really want to focus on is length. We want long, flat toes and engagement into the ground. So I don't like saying grab the ground or claw the ground, because then people start to curl their toes. But really, when you're walking, something as simple as walking and reaching your toes long and feeling your feet engage into the ground can be an amazing place to start. If we're looking for more specific exercises to get you started, so we do recommend rolling a ball under your feet. It's a great way to start to stimulate the nerves underneath your feet and start rebuilding the connection between our feet and our brain. So rolling a ball, get the tissues prepped, get them moving again. And then you can get into more banded exercises, things like holding a band around the front of your toes and pressing them down into that band, where now we're talking more about like a bicep curl for the foot. We're really looking at resisted strength for the foot. So it just kind of depends on what the goal is, what we're trying to work on. Most of my patients, I like to give very, very individualized plans. So they're walking away with 4 exercises, but 4 exercises for you would look very different than 4 exercises for me. But as far as just a general get started, walk barefoot, feel your toes engage into the ground. Or let's try this together, actually. This is a great one to get started. So are you barefoot right now? Pop quiz.
I just flipped off my my cushioned home flip flops that I'm now embarrassed to admit. But
that's okay.
Yes, now I am.
No judgment, right? That's also one big takeaway for me is there's no judgment in this journey. It's all about learning, right? Learning and trying new things. So, okay, so now that we're barefoot, I want you to go ahead and just lift up all your toes. Mm-hmm. And then spread them out as wide as they can. And even if it feels like they're not listening to you, keep trying. And now you're going to lower them down nice and spread to the ground and just kind of press them down and hold that press. And now barely lift your heels off the ground and just hold that. So we've got long engaged toes and we're barely lifting our heels, like maybe even a credit card off the ground. And you should start to feel a muscle called flexor digitorum brevis really starting to engage. And that's a great way to start engaging those foot muscles.
Nice. Very cool. And I also know, and I look, admittedly, my toes, when I look at them, they're pretty crunched together. I'm being honest, right? In fact, there's one toe that really likes the other toe and is like really like curled into him. And I'm like, okay. And then you see like the people who have been doing these foot exercises and using the tool, like I know you have in your kit that kind of like spreads the toes apart as well. So maybe just talk about, since we're talking about it, may as well mention your kit and where people can get it and stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you for mentioning it. So we do find that foot health doesn't have to be complicated. And we wanted to come out with something that was an easy kind of assortment of tools that are very simple with simple things that you can do. So we just came out with a brand new foot health kit. And honestly, the box is like one of my favorite things too, because it has like foot facts on the side and it's just great. But inside the kit, we have a textured ball, we've got a resistance band, and then a canvas carrying bag so you can keep it all in one little place. But what you're talking about right now is the toe spacers. So toe spacers are an amazing tool that you can use to restore the space between your toes. So all they are is a silicone spacer. It looks kind of like what you would use if you got a pedicure, but instead it's reusable. It's made out of silicone. So it is squishy. So it shouldn't cause blisters or anything like that. But they can be uncomfortable to start because when our toes are crammed together for so long, regardless of whether we're talking about a high heel or, more of an athletic shoe that has that tapered toe box, the tissues between the toes can become very tight. And not only the toes, but also between the metatarsals. So when we start wearing toe spacers, they go around your toes kind of like this. And so they just add a little space between the toes. And it can help with restoring alignment of the toes and bringing space back. So they're a really helpful tool. My one kind of key for using them that I think a lot of people mistake is we want to use them passively. So a lot of people will say, I wear them when I'm watching TV or I throw them on at night when I'm reading in bed. Instead, I challenge you to wear them when you're on your feet. And the reason for that is because when we're on our feet is when we use the muscles of our feet. And just like we talked about earlier, when you spread your toes, you get better muscle engagement and more stability in the forefoot. So by wearing the toe spacers, which are designed to be worn on the go, you can actually get more spread and more muscle engagement out of your foot.
Nice. Awesome. And what else comes in the kit? You said a band and a ball?
Yep. So it comes with a resistance band, a ball, the toe spacers, the bag, and then the last piece is we did come out with patented toe strengtheners. And shame on me because my sample kit here doesn't have it. Let me see.
That's okay. You can explain it, or I guess what it is.
So,
Mhm.
but what it is it's basically a resistance band for your toes. So if you imagine, if you've seen the hand strengtheners that
Yes.
have a hole for each of your fingers and you start to spread your fingers to strengthen your hands, it's really common with rock climbers or people with tennis elbow. So we designed new bands for the feet. So it has resistance that goes around each of the toes. And then you can do that same exercise that we just did where you lift your toes and you spread them out, but now you're doing it against resistance. And it comes with 3 different resistances. So you can progressively strengthen your feet over time.
That's very cool. I am definitely interested in that. Yeah, that's cool. I like
It's
that because
very
it's like something.
humbling. I must say, even as someone who works on foot strength, those toe strengtheners are humbling. So
Yes, yes, that's awesome. Yeah, I'm very excited to try those. So cool. And I mean, since you just talked about it, just tell everyone at the end. We'll tell people where they can follow you, but where can they buy the kit if they're listening now?
yeah, just gaithappens.com. So Gait Happens is GAIT. So remember that gait term, and then it's gaithappens.com. And if you just head to the shop there, we have our kits there, or you can just get the spacers by themselves or the strengtheners by themselves.
Perfect, perfect. So that we talked about some foot exercises that people could do. Are there stretches? Is it valuable for people to do ankle stretches, like just kind of putting their foot back maybe and toe on the top of their toe on the ground and stretching the front of their ankle, stretching the back of their ankle? Any kind of things around that people could do?
Yeah, I mean, I think stretching kind of gets a bad rap. Everybody kind of went away from stretching for a long time, and we're kind of seeing that rebound now. So, in general, I'm in favor of mobility is great. So, if stretching your calves, if they feel like there's something that needs help, stretching your calves in that static stretch, my caveat to that is most often, if that is what we need longer hold times. So, actually, like 2 minutes plus per
Mm,
stretch, which is why we don't see a lot of the efficacy with stretching, because who wants to hold a calf stretch per side for 2 minutes? So it's
right.
really kind of committing to those static stretches. But I do think just spending a little bit of time, whether it's like you said, kind of rolling your ankle around, rolling over the top of your foot, stretching back down, something is better than nothing. And I love getting some mobility into the feet and the calves.
Yep. Yep. And I do want to kind of circle back to some of the common foot issues that people have, right? I think 2 of the big ones are these the 2 biggest ones, bunion and plantar fasciitis.
They're definitely
Are
the
kind of,
most popular. Yeah.
yeah, those 2 are very popular. Yeah. And what is it? Again, is that what I guess you kind of touched on what causes them, some of the issues before, but again, so people like they're very common. So what would you recommend people who right now maybe they're listening, they have plantar fasciitis or they have foot pain underneath and they don't even know that that's plantar fasciitis, or they have a bunion. What would you recommend?
Yeah, great question. So let's start with bunions, because I
Hmm.
think we touched on that a little bit more, and then I'll dive a little deeper into the plantar fasciitis. So with bunions, basically what's happening is there's a malalignment of the first metatarsal and the big toe. So this happens when the big toe starts to deviate towards the outer toes, and then you'll start to see a bump develop on the inside of that joint. Now, a lot of people think that that bump is either a bony growth or inflammation, and it does have a lot of inflammation associated with it, and that's why it also can be painful. But really what you're seeing is the head or the end of that first metatarsal starting to stick out to the side. So it's really a dislocation of the toe off of the metatarsal. And this happens because of hypermobility in that joint. And oftentimes this is associated with footwear. So whether it's we're dealing with high heels or whether we're just talking about more athletic footwear that does bring the toes together, it's going to change the mechanics of that toe. And so we really want to make sure that we're looking at toe spacers to help improve the alignment, and then also strengthening exercises. Because as I said, it's about hypermobility. So we really want to have a strong and stable forefoot when we go to push off. So every single step we take, when you're going to push off, you're stepping on just the front of your foot. Now, when you're pushing off just the front of your foot, would you rather do that with a wide, stable base that has good tension across it, or with a base that has the toes squished together and can't get very much activation out of the muscles? It
Right.
just becomes a very easy conversation when you think of it that way. So being able to spread the toes, strengthen the feet, give it a stable platform to push off of, and then toe spacers and a wide toe box shoe are, again, non-negotiable when it comes to bunions. And we do have a combating bunions course as well. Like I said, education is queen, and that's really what we love to do. So if you're wanting more specifics, I definitely recommend checking that out as well.
Oh, awesome. Combating bunions course. Great.
So now let's talk plantar fasciitis.
Yep.
Okay. So plantar fasciitis or plantar fasciopathy. So the kind of umbrella term is plantar fasciopathy, which just means there's something wrong with the fascia. Fasciitis has more of an inflammatory kind of connotation to it. And then there's also plantar fasciosis, which is when it long-term starts to become more degenerative. But let's just go with plantar fasciopathy, talking about irritation of the plantar fascia. Just like any structure in the musculoskeletal system, things come down to how much capacity does that tissue have and how much load is being put on it. If I have high capacity in my tissue and a low amount of load, I'm in the green zone. Everything is happy. But if instead I don't have very good capacity and I'm putting a ton of load through that structure, let's say thousands of times per day, we start to see irritation. And this is what happens with plantar fasciopathy. So the number one thing that I'm looking for with plantar fasciopathy is, again, how do we create stability in the foot? So if I can spread my toes and I can push off of a strong foot, then everybody's happy. But if instead, this muscle right here, so there's a muscle right underneath the center of your foot. It's called flexor digitorum brevis, FDB for short. But that muscle is very, very important in the push-off process. So whether we're talking about walking or running or jumping, that muscle is basically like the springboard of our foot. And if that muscle is not strong, then what we're going to use instead is the plantar fascia. And it starts to become more and more irritated every time that we take a step. So going back to the engaging the toes into the ground and why I care so much about the long toes is by pressing your toes down with long toes, this is the muscle that you're strengthening. This is the muscle that we're activating. So we're really starting to engage that springboard versus using our fascia with every step. So you kind of hear me say the same things a lot, right? Wide toes, engaged foot, long toes, all of these things, whether we're talking about bunions or whether we're talking about plantar fasciopathy, are really important.
Yeah, yeah. And I think part of the problem, right? And then you get plantar fasciitis, let's say, or just anyone whose feet hurt. And then you're like, oh, I just need to rest it. I need to rest it. And then, so yes, you're resting it. That's great. But then when you're resting it, the muscles might atrophy even more. And, sometimes you have to actually go against the grain a little bit, obviously, hopefully under supervision of an expert. But like actually, even, when there might be a little bit of pain or something, do some sort of exercises, right? I'm not a doctor. It's not medical advice. Use someone who knows what they're talking about, like Dr. Perez here. But am I right to say that just doing nothing because, it hurts, so let me just rest it and do nothing may not always be the best solution?
Yes, you're so right. And that's also across the board, whether we're talking about fasciopathy or tendinopathy. So even going to Achilles tendon, a lot of people will rest and think that it's going to go away. But then the second that they start running or doing their activity again, it comes right back. And really, research is pointing towards, in order to increase the stiffness of these tissues, stiffness being a good thing. We want stiff, soft tissues to be able to push off of. In order to increase the stiffness of the tendons, of the fascia, we need to load them. We have to start adding more load. When it comes to Achilles tendinopathy, the gold standard is to be able to do a seated calf raise at 1.5 times your body weight for 6 reps. Not a lot of people can do that.
Right.
So I think it's not only kind of pushing past that barrier and that fear of starting to load it again, but also not stopping at just a resistance band and really starting to add some more heavy load to our training under the supervision of a medical professional.
Right. And then I've heard of this actually recently. Like one of my buddies was saying his daughter's an athlete, and he's like, we went to a running coach who was looking at her functionality of how she was moving and gave her all this feedback and advice, and she was running the wrong way or things like that. Any thoughts on kind of like people going to, and you mentioned it too, like you ideally would see a patient and see how they walk, how they move, look where their imbalances are. For people who maybe don't have someone like you locally, how is there a way that they can do this? Are there practitioners that maybe they could find in their local area?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, I mean, I'm definitely in favor of coaches, of trainers, of movement professionals, whether that's a chiropractor, a physical therapist, somebody to help guide you in your journey. It also helps, even like us as practitioners, we're our own worst critic, right? So it helps to have a second set of eyes. So as far as in our training, so with our functional gait assessment training, we do offer continuing education for health professionals. So we actually certify people in functional gait assessment. So if you go to gaithappens.com, there's a local practitioner map, and we have people all over the world, because we offer courses in person and online, that have taken our courses and are trained in some of these biomechanical systems. So that's one great place to find a resource. I think in general, there's also, there's a few others, like the Healthy Feet Alliance is another organization that has a map of practitioners as well. And it's really just trying to find a practitioner that aligns with your goals. Honestly, I'm very goal oriented. One of the first questions I ask my patients is, what are our goals? And not just, normally the answer is no more pain, right? And that's a lovely goal to have. And I absolutely want to work towards that, but I want something measurable. So I'm like, okay, well, tell me how this pain is affecting your life. And they're like, well, I want to be able to walk my dog. That's a goal. That's something that we can track. Okay, so you went from not being able to walk your dog to walking your dog 1 mile to walking your dog 3 miles, right? So I like having a practitioner that aligns with your goals and sees that in your progress.
Yes, that's very cool that you guys have been certifying other practitioners all over the world. That's so great that people can go to your website and hopefully find someone local to them if they need to. So any other, I know we're kind of coming in close to the end here. Any other big mistakes that you see people making that maybe we haven't talked about that maybe people should be aware of?
I think maybe not a mistake that people make, but maybe one of the questions that I get quite often, especially going back to that conversation about going barefoot, is the fear around it. People are like, my feet are so sensitive, it hurts to walk barefoot. So I just want to talk about that a little bit. I have a really analogy that I like to use, which is, imagine you're walking in the middle of the day into a movie theater. Right? So it's a nice sunny day in the middle of summer. You're going to go sit in that nice, cool, air-conditioned movie theater. You go watch your movie for 2+ hours, whatever it is now. And then you walk back outside into the sunny day. What's the first thing that happens when you walk back outside?
What's the first thing that happens when you walk back outside? Yeah, true. Yeah, your eyes.
Sunny.
Yeah, right.
Your eyes, right? You're like, oh God, it's so bright out here, right?
Yes, gotcha.
You blame the sun for getting brighter.
Right. No, you don't.
No,
right. You don't blame the
change.
dentist for poking at your cavity when your tooth hurts, right? Yes.
Right. Yeah. So it's like the sun didn't change in those 2 hours that you were in that room. What changed was the receptors in your eyes. They turned up the volume so that you could see in the dark room. And now with those receptors turned up high, you walk back outside and the same amount of light that was fine when you walked in is now blinding, right? The same thing is happening in our feet because the ground hasn't changed, right? Our feet have changed. And we have thousands of sensory nerve endings on the bottoms of our feet. So the more that we're in really cushy shoes and soft socks, our feet are in there going, I'm trying to feel something. I'm going to turn up the volume because all I feel is vanilla, right? And so now our feet have turned up that sensitivity. And then we go outside or we even just around our house start to walk around and it feels so sensitive. But that can come back down. So it's all about graded exposure, starting with soft surfaces. Start with going, barefoot on the carpet, going barefoot on soft grass when it's warm enough outside, and then start to vary it up a little bit and expose your feet to different textures. So that's kind of my caveat to barefoot is start graded exposure. So increase small amounts of time and increase, and then start with soft textures and build up to different varied textures. And you'll really start to see your feet change. It's really quite incredible.
That is great advice. I'm going to do that. I mean, I have these cold, hard floors down here that my daughters are constantly, spilling stuff over. So I'm like wearing the flip-flops all the time just to keep my foot nice and clean. But I'm going to take the flip flop and socks off a little more and just get those feet a little dirty.
Yeah,
At least starting slow. I'll start slow, 15, 20 minutes a day. Maybe we increase a little
perfect.
bit after that. But no, this is great advice. I've learned a lot myself. I know so many people listening right now. For many, this is a new topic. It's like, again, I've been lifting weights for 30 years and watch tons of videos and listen to tons of podcasts, and very, very rare to actually hear someone talking about this. And it's got to be one of the most important things, right? I mean, if you don't
I
have
think so, but I'm biased because I like feet now. So
well, I mean, we want to walk around and not be in pain when we're older, right? So it's just like really a no-brainer. So this has just been an absolute pleasure. You mentioned your website, Gait Happens, GAIT happens.com. Anywhere else where people can follow you, find you, learn more?
yeah, so Gait Happens, we have a pretty big Instagram account. We post 5 days a week and have for the last 7 years. So definitely check out the Gait Happens Instagram account. And then we're also posting more and longer form videos to YouTube as well. So check us out on YouTube and Instagram. Head to the website. If you feel like signing up for the newsletter, we come out with an educational newsletter every 2 weeks. So you can nerd out in whatever format you're looking for.
Amazing. Well, yeah, I'm gonna sign up for the newsletter, buy myself one of those kits, and see if I can get that toe strengthener to work on and get that toe strength and foot strength going. Spread out those toes a little more. So this has been real. Actually, I'm going to send this episode to a couple people I know that have been complaining about bunions and plantar fasciitis. So this has been an absolute pleasure, Dr. Perez. Thank you so much, and I hope we can do it again sometime.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the episode, can you please leave us a rating or review and subscribe? I've realized that while we have actually increased our downloads a lot, we're actually getting a lot of downloads, which I'm really happy about. We actually have very few ratings. And I realized that I've never asked people really to rate much. So I'm asking you now if you could please rate and review and subscribe. And if you enjoyed the episode, please forward it along to anyone that you think will get value out of this. Also, if you haven't checked out our line of products at buypeakperformance.com, you get 20% off your first order. That's www.buypeakperformance.com. We have some incredible products, including our organic high-altitude coffee. If you don't know this, coffee is one of the most heavily sprayed with pesticides out of any crop. So it's really important that you drink organic coffee. We've gone above and beyond to source what we believe is the highest quality and healthiest organic coffee in the world. We're also famous for our organic green superfood powder. You can get 20% off of that as well at buypeakperformance.com. We also have an organic vegan and paleo plant protein. See, most of the vegan proteins out there are using brown rice protein, which is really not a good source of protein, and it's also a grain. And if you're paleo, you know that grains tend to cause inflammation in some cases for some people. And so we wanted to make one that was paleo friendly and vegan and organic. We made an amazing amino acid profile, so it's really one of the best plant proteins for muscle building. So you can check out Peak Performance Organic Plant Protein. You can find that on our website. Of course, all our products are on Amazon as well. So thanks again. And again, please, if you enjoyed the episode, please forward it along to someone who you feel can get value out of it. And please leave us a rating, review, and subscribe. Thank you.